cords of death, they were surrounding me, but he heard my cry for help. So I'll stand and trust, I'll stand in faith, I will not be shaken. So I'll stand and trust, I'll stand in faith, I will not be shaken. Our God will not be moved, our God will never change, our God will reign forevermore. Oh, our God will not be moved, our God will never change, our God will reign forevermore. Oh, our God will not be moved, our God will never change, our God will reign forevermore. Oh, our God will not be moved, our God will never change, our God will reign forevermore. So I'll stand in trust, I'll stand in faith, I will not be shaken. So I'll stand in trust, I'll stand in faith, I will not be shaken. Our God will not be moved, our God will never change, our God will reign forevermore. Oh, our God will not be moved, our God will never change, our God will reign forevermore.
If you're friends with my wife on Facebook, then you know we love to go hiking. It's one of our favorite things to do when we have time for it. But we tend to have some unusual experiences when we're hiking. Our kids tend to think that we're normal, even-keeled, level-headed individuals, but a strange and dangerous transformation takes place when we lace up our hiking boots. So they say, we all of a sudden become thrill-seeking, unconventional, not just unconventional, but risk-taking individuals. Let me give you a few examples, and you can be the judge of whether you think this is over the top or not. We once went off on a 26.2-mile hike simply to say we did a marathon hike. I'm sure everybody does that goes out hiking. We also headed out one day on an 8-hour hike on a hot summer day with only one bottle of water. Celeste says we had two, but my story sounds better. We had one bottle of water between the two of us. We got to the top of this mountain where we were going to fill up our bottles with more water to head back down again, only to find out the cafe on this mountain was closed for renovations. So there we are in excessive heat, about maybe 2/3 of a bottle of water, 4 hours to go back home. We really had to ration the water on the back home. One time we got up at 5 a.m., drove for 2.5 hours to the mountains, hiked for 10 hours, going up 5,000 feet in elevation, and then drove 2.5 hours back home again. That one may have been a little excessive. And our most recent example, when we were in Switzerland this summer, on our first day in Switzerland, we went ahead and hiked for 9 hours on jet lag before running into the worst storm we've ever been caught in. We were trying to get to this railway station where you could take the mountain train back down the mountain, and about 30, 40 minutes before we got there, Mother Nature let loose on us. It started raining, the wind was blowing in strong gusts, and then the hail started coming. We kept trying to move forward, but eventually we decided this is not working with hail falling in your face. It's just really hard. So we tried to get down, and we were above the tree line. There's nowhere to seek shelter at this point. So we're hunkered down next to this bush, and let me tell you, it was not doing anything to stop the rain and the hail from getting to us. We had welts on our body from the hailstones. We were soaked through to the bone. We were getting cold. Finally, it let up enough where we thought we could continue the rest of the way. There were inches of hailstones on the ground. We made it to the railway station, missed the last train going back down the mountain, but that's okay. There was a hotel there at this train station. It was booked full for the evening. So we went out, and we were standing there at the edge of the mountain, looking at the sign that said 3 hours to hike down to the bottom. We only had about 2 hours of daylight. We were soaking wet. We were shivering cold. It was still raining. Everything was dark from the clouds. And in that moment, despite being a confident, optimistic, problem-solving kind of guy, I was actually kind of scared. I really didn't know what to do. We were tired. Like I said, we were jet lagging, soaked through to the bone, shoes, clothing, everything. And I didn't think we had 3 hours in us to go down the mountain. The Bible has some really good advice for us when we're in situations like this, but not just in these kind of situations. It's really good advice no matter what kind of situation we're in. It's a familiar passage, but one I think that it's good to read over and over again. Probably a lot of you have already memorized this passage, but I'm going to read it anyway. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight." Heavenly Father, we read this verse and it sounds so simple. It sounds so easy, such a great promise, and yet we don't come to you nearly often as we should. Pray that you would open our eyes to the truth of this passage and give us the motivation that we need to really go about following it in our lives. Amen. You know, we love to hear promises. We're confronted with promises all the time that sound great. You can look at some TV ad and it says, lose 50 pounds in 1 week without exercise or changing your eating habits. And we think, man, that's awesome. If that would work, all sorts of people would be willing to follow it. Or the car salesman comes up and says, this car can be yours. It doesn't matter about your credit history. No money down. You can leave today with this car. And we think that's great. Or, heard this one sometime, you can earn $100,000 a year from the comfort of your own home. And we're thinking, man, that'd be awesome. I get to stay at home and earn $100,000. That would be great. Or some of us may have gone ahead and contemplated this promise a few times about maybe we ought to get some more information. You can have a full head of hair again, John. I don't know if we've thought about this one at any time. I was talking to my daughter-in-law about this a couple days ago, and I said, you know, when you're as good looking as I am, you don't have to worry about whether you got hair on your head or not. And she smiled and she said, you know, I've only ever heard bald people talking like that. So maybe there's some truth to that. But after we're done getting excited about the promises, we think, I wonder what I have to do. If this promise is going to be true, what am I going to have to actually do to see that it happens? So let's go ahead and get started. The promise in this passage is God will make your path straight. Or in other translations, he will show you the right way. He will guide you. Now, before going on, I think it's worthwhile to talk about what this passage does not say about our paths. It doesn't say the path is going to be short. We love short paths. If I'm going to get to this goal over here, I want it to take 24 hours or less. Best if it'll happen in the next hour. We don't want to have a whole lot of time to go down paths that are going to last a long period of time. But it doesn't say that here. God never says our path will be short. He doesn't say the path will make sense, because that's what we're about. We're saying, okay, God, show me where you want to go, and as long as I'm in agreement with you, we're going to go down that path. But if it don't make no sense to me, I'm not going down there. That'd be stupid to go down a path that doesn't make sense. He also doesn't say you're going to enjoy the path I pick out for you. That's another one. If this path sounds like great fun, I'm going to have a wonderful time going down this path, then I'm going full steam down the path. But if it doesn't look like it's going to be a lot of fun, it's going to be a challenging path, it's going to be a hard path, I don't know if I want to do that. He also doesn't say that all your friends are going to be on the same path. You start trying to really live for God's word and all of its teaching, especially the ones that culture is going in the other direction, you're going to find there ain't many people on the path that God is laying out for you. It also doesn't say that the path will be filled with riches. We'd love to go down a path that's easy, that we're going to enjoy, that we're going to get rich doing, but that's also not the promise he gives us. Now, the promise is still great. I mean, think about the God of the universe, the eternal God, personally taking an interest in your life and laying out a path for you to go on. I mean, that's pretty spectacular. God taking the time and the interest to do that for you. We think in the Bible about the pillar of fire and cloud that led the Israelites through the desert. I mean, that's the most visible example we can see of God physically right there. I mean, the Israelites had it real easy. They just waited. If the pillar got up and started moving, they followed it. And yet that's the analogy, that's the picture that we need to be doing. When God says we're going down here, he wants us to go down that way with him. Now, I think a lot of us could probably talk about some miraculous ways where we've seen that kind of guidance from God in our lives as well. But sometimes it's not such a miraculous way. Sometimes it's not quite so dramatic. When Celeste and I felt God leading us to the mission field, I didn't see a pillar of cloud or fire. But we were praying a lot about it, and God, through the peace that he gives you that passes all understanding, through his inner still voice, confirmed to us that that was the path we were supposed to go on. Scared the heck out of us. Taking 4 kids, moving over to another country where you don't speak the language to do a task that a lot of people aren't going to appreciate. If it wasn't for this solid peace that God gives, I don't think we could have done that. But we were sure it was coming from God, and we decided to follow him. Now, there's also an element in this verse, in this promise, about God leveling out our path or clearing obstacles out of the way so that we can go forward. You think about this pillar of cloud and fire. It led them to the Red Sea. Okay, there's a big obstacle. And then God took care of getting the obstacle out of the way so that the people could go through. We can think about Jesus calling Peter out on the water and went ahead and suspended the law of physics so that he could walk on top of the water as long as he was believing. He directed the Israelites to go to Jericho and made it possible for them to take care of the obstacle that was in front of them. All throughout the Bible, we see God's directing people where they want to go, or rather where he wants them to go, and then getting the obstacles out of the way that they can accomplish whatever it is he set them down on that path to do. But God's not going to force you to go down the path he lays out for you. He's not going to force me. He lays out the path, and he gives you an opportunity to do it. Tried to do that with the Israelites when he said, go in and take the promised land. And they said, yeah, I don't know about that. That looks kind of dangerous. We might get hurt. We might get killed. Did you see how big those people are? No. We're just going to stay right here, God. Unfortunately, that's the decision that we often make when we see the path God has laid out for us. Now, we really shouldn't be that scared to follow the path God gives us, because we are often willing to follow the advice of friends and family, knowing that their advice is not always good. And also, we're willing to follow the advice of a particular God that all of us follow fairly often with an incredible amount of devotion and trust. I brought one of these little gods with me today. Here it is, the God of the GPS. We love these little things, and I'm not saying it's bad, but I do say we're willing to follow this with complete trust, even when it doesn't seem to make sense. Let me give you a few examples. These are true stories. A man in New Jersey went right through a T in the road and drove into a house because his GPS said go straight. A person drove up to within inches of a cliff, stopping just in time, and when asked about it, he said, I was just trusting my GPS. I like this one. 3 tourists in Australia tried to drive to an island. Think about that for just a moment. They left the pavement, went across the gravel, then the sand, into the water, and somewhere around the time the waves were splashing against their tires, they thought, this isn't going to work out too well. But my favorite example, a lady in Brussels needed to go to the airport to pick up needed to go to the train station outside of town. She followed her GPS out of Belgium, through Germany, Austria, Slovenia, and into Croatia, stopping to fill up with gas twice and to sleep once, and finally deciding, maybe this isn't leading me where I want to go. Trusting the GPS that was wrong. We have many decisions that we face in life. I'm sure we all have decisions we're facing this week, maybe even today. God will help us to make the right choice. He'll help to guide us. We have His promise. We're not alone when we're being faced with important decisions, trying to figure out what the right path is. And if we're so willing to follow a GPS that leads us into the ocean, shouldn't we be even more willing to follow the infallible God that never makes a mistake? He's never sleeping. He's never too busy. He's never off taking a nap. He's always ready and willing to help guide us. Okay, so the promise is great. We've got God. He's going to give us a straight path, clear out the obstacles, guide us, but there's a few prerequisites in this passage we need to talk about. Prerequisite number 1, trust in the Lord completely. Trust in the Lord completely. You need a relationship with Christ for any of this to really work out in your life. That's the first step. Faith, trust, a follower of Jesus. And you need to trust Him with all your heart. It doesn't help to have half-hearted trust, to be pretty sure about your relationship with Christ. I talked to my dad a few years back about his relationship with Christ. He's getting older. You know, what's going to happen when you die, Dad? And he told me, this was pretty much his words, I'm pretty sure I know where I'm going when I die. And I said, pretty sure? Dad, pretty sure isn't going to make it. Pretty sure that I don't have to go to work tomorrow is probably not going to be real good. Now, I know I don't have to go to work tomorrow. You may not either, and that's a good thing. But it's good to be really sure about it. Pretty sure the doctor gave me the right medicine. I don't think I'd be taking it if I'm only pretty sure it's the right medicine. I'm pretty sure the girl down here on the second pew is my wife. I better be completely sure about that before I go home with her. That's also not a good thing. And I'm pretty sure I'm saved is not going to cut it. You need to know that you know that you know. Completely trusting in the Lord. Pretty sure is not good enough when it comes to important issues. You either have faith or you don't, and a half-hearted faith in Christ is really no faith at all. When Celeste and I went to Germany, we got to the airport, we got on the plane, we had to be completely sure at that point, completely trusting that the plane was going to get us to the destination we wanted to go. Without that assurance, I'm not going to get on a plane. You show up at the airport and the pilot says, just want y'all to know today, we're pretty sure this plane's going to make it. I'm not getting on that plane. I want him to know we have 100% faith, reliability, just been serviced, everything's good, filled up with gas. This plane is going to make it. Then I'm getting on. Not if the pilot isn't even sure. Okay, what's the second prerequisite? Think about God always. Just don't go to Him when times are tough, just when you're in trouble. We can go to Him with everything at any time. See, we tend to compartmentalize God, or we put Him on the bench and call Him into the game of life whenever His specific skill set is needed. Now, usually that means we've screwed up royally, and then we're like, geez, could you come on over here? I need you to fix this up because I've just made a mess of everything. Now, He's gracious enough, He will often do that. But we need to be like the disciples who walked around with him for 3 years. Sure, they had the advantage that he was a physical person right there in their midst, and yet they give us the example of how that should work in our lives. They were just kind of hanging out with him every day. They'd say, what do you want to eat? Where should we go next? You got anything you want to try to teach us? You know, that should be our attitude when we're going through life, and it just naturally occurs to us to say, hey, God, what do you think about this? Would that be a good thing to do, or should I go that? Or, geez, thank you for this. Or that. But we're in just kind of a constant communion, a constant fellowship with him, thinking about him just all throughout the day, not just getting up and have a quiet time and saying, okay, God, I'm done with you for the day. I've gone ahead and prayed up for the day, and I'm off to go. No, just having that ongoing relationship with him. Now, we can go too far on this. My favorite toothpaste, Colgate Max Fresh with whitening shockwave. Well, that's quite a description for it, but I really like it. You know, I never consulted God about that. Hope you don't think that's a bad thing. I didn't go to God. I don't go to God with what shampoo I'm going to use, with the conditioner, you know, what cereal I like best in the morning. There's those little things where God has equipped us with enough intelligence and likes and dislikes where it's okay to make those kind of decisions, but going to God too often is probably not the problem most of us are dealing with. Few people go to God with too many decisions. We have more of an issue of not going often enough. The third prerequisite in this is put your wisdom on the back burner indefinitely. Now, for many of us, that's really good advice to just put our wisdom back there because it's not really all that great. But there's other people, they really are really smart. I was reading in the internet about some people who are incredibly smart. This one guy called something, I can't even pronounce his name, Kim Young. He was attending physics classes at the age of 3. I don't even know how that's possible. I had physics in high school, never understood the smallest thing of what was being discussed. I just asked the guy in my work group, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. I don't understand any of that. I don't know how I passed, but I got through. And I was a lot older than 3. There was this other guy I read about. He took his college entrance exam at 8 years old and had almost a perfect score. Once again, I was a whole lot older than that, and perfect was not the word they used to describe my score. So I got in to a state school where they didn't have much in the way of requirements. But yeah, I was not almost perfect. But people who are really smart like this, and maybe you're like that, it can be really tough for people like that because they say, I've studied a lot. I know the best decision to make in almost every category, and I might go to God if I'm faced with something that's somehow out of my experience or out of my intellect or out of my learning. But that is a very dangerous decision to make. See, the Bible makes it clear that it's much better to trust in God than to rely on our own wisdom and logic. God can see the future. He's never made a single mistake. He's an expert in, well, everything. He doesn't have hidden agenda. He only wants what's best for you, and nothing ever catches him by surprise. He's a good person to go to for decisions that we need to make. Now, I did not say throw your wisdom out completely. Please hear that. He gives us wisdom, and James even tells us in the Bible, if you're lacking wisdom, come to God who willingly gives us wisdom for those who are seeking it. But we should never put our earthly wisdom above or in place of God. That's where it becomes a problem. Now, his guidance may catch us by surprise at times. We go to him for some wisdom, and he says, okay, this is what I want you to do. And we're like, okay, is there anything else you want me to do? I didn't really like that option very much. When he told us to leave my computer programming job and be a missionary overseas, that wasn't exactly down my career path that I was envisioning at that time. But that's what we were sure he was telling us, so that's what we did. In conclusion, I just want to get back to our hike for a minute because you're probably wondering what happened to us. We're standing up there on the mountain not having any idea what to do. But first of all, how do we get in this problem to begin with? First, I relied way too much on my own understanding, on my own wisdom. You think maybe I should have asked God before we headed out that morning, the first day in Switzerland on jet lag, should we plan on going on a 20-mile hike, tired, knowing that storms are predicted to come later in the afternoon? That might have been something that I should have probably asked God about, but I thought, I will figure it out. It'll be okay. It was a glorious day. Up until the storms hit, we were having a grand time. I didn't need to consult God about that. Everything was fine. Another problem, and I make the same mistake we all make, I waited till I was in trouble before asking God for help. I waited till we were in the midst of the hailstorm. Actually, it was a little bit after that. When we got up there and we were looking down at the edge of the mountain, looking at that winding path 3 hours down the hill, then we started praying. Because then it's like, God, I have no idea what to do. I really don't have any idea, and we could really use a sign. We stood there for a minute, looked at each other, and thought, hiking down this mountain probably isn't the best thing to do. So we felt like God gave us guidance to go back inside the hotel and take the waitress up on her offer. We'd been in there before asking whether it had any rooms available. She said, well, if you want a hot cup of tea, come on in, I'll give you a hot cup of tea. Well, this is going against my conventional wisdom. We already don't have enough daylight to get down the mountain. Why are we going to go back in the hotel and have a hot cup of tea? But we both felt like heading down the mountain was going to be a bad decision. So we went back inside, had a hot cup of tea, warmed up a little bit, looked at each other, still didn't really know what to do. So we enjoyed our hot cup of tea, warmed up a little bit. Hot cup of tea always does you pretty good when you're cold. So then we got our stuff back on. We went back outside. Felt a lot better. The rain had stopped. The clouds were starting to break up a little bit. And the hotel manager had told us inside before we went out, he said, you know, the last train's already come up and down the mountain. He said, if you just walk straight down the path along the tracks, it'll be a lot more wide open. You won't have to worry about slipping in the mud on the path and everything where the rain and the hail have been coming down. It'll be a lot more light there because there's not trees all over blocking the path that the train goes on. I hadn't thought of that. So we went back out, feeling a little bit better. We went down to the track and we started heading down the track. God cleared all the obstacles out of the way. We never fell. We didn't really slip at all. We had flashlights with our iPhones. We even made it across the train trestle at the end over a raging river, also not something you're supposed to do, but there was no other way to go. So made it across that, found our way back home again. A lot of this could have been avoided if I'd have been in closer communion with God from the very beginning and had sought His advice before we got into trouble. So let me just use this to encourage you. Don't wait until you're in the midst of a hailstorm to ask God to guide your path. Trust Him completely. Think about Him always. Put your wisdom on the back burner indefinitely, and He will make your path straight.